Hello, everyone. Hello. Welcome. So glad you're here. Welcome to the 21st Central Texas African American Family Support Conference. My name is Jacqueline Miller, and I am your moderator for Mental Fatigue, Healthy Coping with Dual Pandemics of Racism and COVID-19. While we wait for more people to join, let's get to know each other a bit. I'm going to ask a couple of questions, so please put your answers in the chat box. So please tell us where you're joining us from. Oh, we are thrilled that you are here. Thank you for joining us. So glad that you are here. So as you continue to tell us where you're joining us from, how are you feeling today? Share that with us in the chat box. Well, thank you for your responses and sharing with us this morning. And feel free to continue putting in a chat box where you're joining us from and how you are feeling today. Before we get started, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor for this session, Sendero Health Plans. We are grateful for their support in helping make this event possible. Now, we have a few housekeeping items to go over together. This is a safe, supportive space. Please help us to maintain a respectful and inclusive environment. Please mute yourself at all times. Please remember that we are live on Facebook. Please use the chat function on Whova to interact with other attendees. And for questions for the presenter, use the Q&A function in Whova. Here's another thing that's important. If you feel overwhelmed or need to talk to someone during this session, please call 512-472-4357. Press 1, then 1 again for immediate emotional support. Between sessions, you can visit our comfort suite where we provide a safe haven. You'll find the comfort suite in community under the main navigation in Whova. We have a number of surveys. If you are registered for continuing education credit or CEU, please check the chat for links. The first link will sign you in for your CEU. Once again, the first link will sign you in for your CEU. Please sign in at the beginning of the session. After the workshop, there will be another link for CEU evaluations. Please click on that link for a short evaluation, which also includes the CEU request form. Once you've completed the evaluation, you'll be taken to a page with a link to your CEU certificate. And we'll also post a link for the workshop evaluation in the chat. I also need to let you know that we have some great conference merchandise. So be sure to check out our online store at CTAAFSC. I'll repeat that. CTAAFSC.com/shop. I think it's a great day to shop, right? And it's even funner doing it online. Oh my goodness. So everyone, please join me in welcoming our presenter, Kendall Brown. Kendall is a licensed professional counselor, licensed chemical dependent counselor, trained EMDR therapist, certified life coach, as well as a former teacher. She works at the Potter's House Center of Counseling and Behavioral Health, where she works with issues such as trauma, anger, addiction, anxiety, abuse, divorce, teen phase of life, self-esteem, self-care, sexuality, and family couples conflict. Kendall is currently completing her marriage and family coursework and received a Master's of Arts degree in counseling from Dallas Baptist University. Kendall has spoken about mental health across the state of Texas. You can learn more about Kendall's work by reading her bio in Hoover. Now, let's join the presentation, and we'll be back together soon for a live Q&A. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for that introduction. As I get ready to pull up my PowerPoint, thank you all for just being in attendance today. Okay, mental fatigue, healthy coping with pandemics of racism and COVID-19. I am Kendall Brown, and I'm here to present to you. Thank you for coming. I know that this topic is intriguing and can be heavy. And so let's be open and let's moving forward. Okay, I want to thank Integral Care and the Central Texas African American Family Support Conference. This is my third year speaking. It's always a privilege to be able to be a part of something so great that is happening in the community. I'm grateful and thank you again, and thank you for everyone in attendance. Okay, so as I said before, I'm a licensed professional counselor. I am a licensed chemical dependent counselor, and I'm trained in EMDR therapy. I have a bachelor's in psychology, a master's in business, and a master's in counseling. I work at the Center of Counseling and Behavioral Health at the Potter's House of Dallas. I'm so blessed and so thankful to be able to be working at the Potter's House during this pandemic because of our wonderful CEO, Bishop T.D. Jakes. He has just been a blessing to mental health and the counseling center and allowing us to expand beyond our local reach. We were providing therapy free of charge, donation based for such a long time. And now we are able to provide therapy over Zoom and reach all of Texas. And so now we're available to Austin to provide therapy and life coaching across the nation. And so we're just blessed to be able to do that and provide those services. Okay, so mental fatigue, healthy coping with dual pandemics of racism and COVID-19. This presentation is to tell you what mental fatigue is and what Black fatigue is. How does one become fatigued from the uncertainty of the pandemics? And what are the coping skills for fatigue? That are caused from racism in the pandemic, in the COVID-19 pandemic. I like to define fatigue as stress that hits like a ton of bricks, back to back. It's a constant battle to overcome. It leaves you feeling depleted, empty. It's so overwhelming that you aren't able to even be the same you. You're not functioning the same. I mean, you have a feeling to avoid the situation, these situations that surround or that are connected to it, because of the fact that you are so bombarded with thing after thing without time to recover. It's just like bang, 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 back to back. That's how I describe fatigue. It's just too much. So when we define fatigue, it's often defined with mental fatigue and physical fatigue. So it's often defined when we think about the mental part. The mental fatigue leads to physical fatigue. And so we're talking about the mental fatigue, not being able to concentrate, losing focus, not staying alert, not remembering things, being easily angered, becoming socially isolated, becoming withdrawn, impatient, having more irritability, emotionally empty. Now, the physical that comes from that is now you have less energy. You may not have the motivation to do things that you enjoy, to exercise, to move. And because of the inability to focus or concentrate, causes you to have trouble sleeping. Probably because you're so worried and overwhelmed by what's going on through your day that you can't sleep at night. Okay, so another definition that was described is fatigue, best defined as the difficulty in initiating or sustaining voluntary activities, things that you want to do. You have a hard time doing it. I want you to know that if you're experiencing fatigue, you're not alone. It's beyond just regular tired. It's draining mentally, emotionally, physically. All of these things is happening when you talk about mental fatigue. And I want to say that you're not alone. I have been experiencing fatigue during this pandemic because of the drastic changes, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, and then the emotional and the mental fatigue of Black fatigue. These things have been compounding, and so we have to deal with them. And so I'm here so we can talk about how to deal with these things, because you're not alone. Let's process it. Let's work through it. Let's not stay in it. Let's move forward. Okay, so warning signs of mental fatigue: waking up exhausted, even after a good night of sleep, not feeling motivated to begin the day, inability to do activities that you enjoy, sudden bouts of exhaustion that go away and then return, decreased productivity, inability to concentrate or focus. Mental fatigue can affect people for short and long periods of time. I want to highlight that because sometimes, you think, oh, well, it can just be one day or um, a week, two longer period of time where you're just mentally, emotionally drained and depleted. The rest of the brain overactivity. So the result of the brain is this: the overactivity. This is a condition where the brain cells become exhausted. So basically, your brain is just exhausted from just doing too much in such a short time frame. This information is found from the Better Health USA. To expound further on the effects of mental fatigue on physical performance. So again, mental fatigue leads to physical fatigue. It's impossible to maintain physically performing without having the mental capacity to, because your brain, your mind tells your body what to do. And so if your mind can't even keep you focused to do the normal activities, there's no way that it can tell you, hey, get energy, hey, be active, right? So it's the stress, it's the travel changes, it's the poor sleep, it's the cognitive overload, just the too much that's happening, the competition, the family and friends, because life is still happening. In the midst of everything that the pandemics that are causing fatigue, life is still happening. And so we have to be able to learn how to deal with the mental fatigue. Mental health matters. And so if you are experiencing fatigue, put it in the chat. Let me know. Or go to the polleverywhere.com and let me know what you're experiencing. Is it withdrawal? Have you been feeling defeated, overwhelmed, losing lack of focus, emotional, decreased motivation? The next thing that I wanted to define is, what is pandemic? What does that mean? We hear epidemic, but now this word pandemic means it's prevalent over a whole country or world of a disease. It's of a disease. And so we talk about coronavirus being a pandemic because now it's spread all over the world. And so one may say, how can racism be a pandemic? Is it a disease? is dis-ease. Dis-ease for the people of that race is dis-ease. And so when Merriam-Webster definition of racism, it defines what racism is. And then it also talks about how internalized racism and hatred plague the world. Plague, pandemic, disease, plague. And so when we talk about how it's affecting the whole world, racism is no longer just in Texas or in the United States or in certain parts of the world. It's all over. It's everywhere. Everywhere has been affected by racism. Saw during this 2020 year where in the protests and the marches were happening, we saw how people were standing together against racism. Black fatigue. Black fatigue is defined by how racism erodes the mind. So Mary Frances Winters wrote a book this year during the pandemic called How Racism Erodes the Mind, Body, and Spirit. She defines Black fatigue as it is about the fatigue that comes from the pain and the anguish of living with racism every single day of your life. It's about being fatigued by those who are surprised and express outrage with no action. That such inequities still exist. It's about the constant fatigue of not knowing whether you or a loved one will come home alive. Fatigue destroys performance. This fatigue is that back to back, because it's not just one incident, it is constant. It is something that's happening daily. It is something that is not changing. And so, of course, it's going to take a long-term effect because it's happening consistently without a break, without recovery time. In the book, there is a quote by Jermaine D. Williams. I am not okay. I am not okay today. I want to give the Black community permission to say I am not okay. I am tired. I have not watched the video of Ahmaud Arbery. It is too much. I have not watched the video of George Floyd. It is too much. Black people have to go to work the next day and be all right. I am not okay. I am tired, and I'm tired of racism. This is profound because I wanted to hone in on this because it's okay to not be okay. Part of our mental health is to identify, I am not okay. I'm not okay with what's going on in the world, with me, in my life, in my circumstances. I am not okay with that. And it's okay to identify that and be okay with that idea of not being okay. Accept it and learn how to get out of it moving forward. In this moment, I'm not okay, but I'm going to work through it. I'm going to process it till I can become okay. Because if you don't, then it's going to erode. And that's what she's talking about. Causes of fatigue. Repeated variations of stress that result in extreme exhaustion and cause mental, physical, and spiritual maladies that are passed down from generation to generation. This Black fatigue. It's the idea of you have to think about telling somebody to stop killing us. It's the idea that you have to say Black Lives Matter. How does one be Black and not get fatigued? How does it not affect mind, body, and spirit if you want to experience it consistently? And identifying that it is affecting you is the beginning of the battle. Knowing that the circumstances took a toll. And it's okay to recognize that. The mental fatigue, that's the accumulation of too much, too many decisions, too much work, in not enough time. It's the time frame that makes it too much, because you are pushed into a box to finish something in a certain amount of time. Too many interruptions, demands, and shifts in attention. Too many things that are going on without time to pause and restore. And then the lack of sleep. It's that part that says that time to pause and restore. We have to have time to restore from one thing to the next, one stressor to the next. And sometimes we don't have that break in between. So we were already in a pandemic. We had the stay-at-home order. And then there's no justice for Breonna Taylor. Then there's no justice for Ahmaud Arbery. Then there's no justice for Floyd. That is draining. Let's watch a video.
Check your privilege edition. Put a finger down if you have been called a racial slur. Put a finger down if you've been followed in a store unnecessarily. Put a finger down if someone has crossed the street to avoid passing you. Put a finger down if you've had someone clench their purse in an elevator with you. Put a finger down if you've had someone step off of an elevator to keep from riding with you. Put a finger down if you've been accused of not being able to afford something expensive. Put a finger down if you have had fear in your heart when being stopped by the police. Put a finger down if you have never been given a pass on a citation that you deserved. Put a finger down if you have been stopped or detained by police for no valid reason. Put a finger down if you have been bullied solely because of your race. Put a finger down if you have been denied service solely because of the color of your skin. Put a finger down if you've ever had to teach your child how not to get killed by the police. Any fingers left? That's privilege.
I wanted to point that out because a lot of times we dismiss things, we minimize the experiences that we have and say, you know, that's just life, we deal with it. And it is part of life, and we do deal with it. But you think about how that affects you time and time again when you have to put down more fingers than you have. Those experiences do take a toll. And while they may be suppressed and repressed, they are affecting you. And if you have to, without having to think about it, subconsciously, you just respond and say, oh, you recognize that racism is real. And so you just say, hey, be careful how, you respond when the police pulls you over. When you go in the store, they may think this way. Oh, when you go to an interview, you make sure wear your hair this way. Oh, that they may say, oh, you shouldn't do this when you're in that store because of that racism. Okay. And so that's the pandemic I'm speaking of. So then we have the pandemic of racism and COVID-19. We have the two things that have become overlapping in 2020. And so you have Black Lives Matters movement, and people are worried about justice and harmony and protest and rioting and looting. And then you have to worry about wearing a mask and being a person on the first line, essential worker. And also worry about your social, your physical, your environment, your occupation, your financial, your spiritual, and your emotional. Those are all of the things that one would have to maintain without allowing themselves to become fatigued. One of the things that was causing a lot of stress is seeing this on the news every day. A new amount of cases, a new amount of deaths, then running out of places to put dead bodies, just so many traumatic events that you saw on the news regarding COVID-19 and the coronavirus. It had become 4 weeks to 8 weeks to 16 weeks, and it's just an ongoing thing that, one would start to become depleted about. Very fatigued, pandemic fatigue, COVID-19 fatigue. And it's okay because you're not alone. How has COVID-19 pandemic affected us? Certainly has caused fear and anxiety and feelings of uncertainty. Okay, we all have fear of what will happen. What is the next thing that'll happen? When will this be over? Everybody wants to know, when is this going to be over? When will we be able to get back to our old normal? Or will we be able to? Is that even possible? Because now we've created a new normal. It's normal for one to travel with a mask on and go everywhere with the mask on. It's normal for us to be communicating and adapting to social media and having every type of communication through video chat, from working to therapy to medical appointments to concerts to conferences, all through video. Socializing and being distant from your work environment to church. Nothing is face to face, in person. So adapting to this social life, this social distance life, where you can't go to a restaurant because they're closed. And if you go to the restaurant, then you have to have your temperature checked. And then there is, there's a separation. But now, when people were dining outside, it's too cold. It's getting too cold to dine outside. So that option is now out the picture. So now it's a new adaptation to just no restaurant, period. And then the shopping experience, from purchasing Lysol and toilet paper and water. Those things are out of stock. And sometimes it's frustrating, and learning how to cope with that, and not, being a hoarder. Traveling just won't be the same. For thinking about going on a cruise, that definitely won't be the same. We have been affected by COVID-19 pandemic, and we have evolved to a new space, a new normal. And that's okay. Emotional wholeness and uncertainty. It's going to be that social connection, staying active, managing stress, eating healthy, getting quality sleep. Quality sleep means sleeping for over 4 hours at a time, so that your body can get into that REM sleep, that restoration sleep. Meaning and purpose, finding the meaning in your life, finding purpose in yourself, seeking to take time out for yourself, taking care of yourself, that self-care, building your brain muscle, your emotions, your emotional intelligence, becoming self-aware, processing your feelings when you are aware of them, talking to someone, checking in with your own personal needs, allowing yourself to feel things, and allowing yourself to grieve. It's okay to feel like you have nothing in control, but you talk about it, you deal with it, and you can work through it. And lastly, pay attention to your body. Your body is always responding to your mind. Healthy coping. Take time off. Use your PTO. Set aside time again for yourself. Prioritize your responsibilities. Make fewer decisions. Keeping things in perspective. See the bright side of things. See the outlook, see the best things that could be happening right now for you. How could you make a difference? What could be? Remember, it's okay to feel it. It's okay to feel it. Just don't stay in it. Feel it and move forward. Talk about your problems, even if they won't be solved. A lot of problems won't be solved, and definitely not overnight. We have to work through them, but you can still talk about them, because repressing them and suppressing them is not going to be the solution. You do not need to put them to the side, because you will eventually have them be coming out into your life through mental fatigue, stress, depression, anxiety, high blood pressure, dis-ease. However that may look, it has to come out. You're not created to keep it in. Some research says that you should drink a cup of coffee or tea. That caffeine will help you jumpstart your day. That doesn't work for me, but it may work for you. Some, they say to go for a 30-minute walk. That may be something that'll be beneficial to you if you're not going outside, walk around your house. Some would say take a nap. Now, this does work for me. A midday nap can help overcome tiredness later in the day. Here's the thing, though. A lot of times people want to sleep longer than 30 minutes. So it's a power nap. You don't need to sleep longer than 30 minutes, because that is taking you into the opposite. Now you're going to turn on the opposite, and you're going to be, as it says, groggy. You're going to be fatigued. You're going to be lethargic after a nap that's longer than 30 minutes. And also, skip the alcohol. It's a depressant. You don't need it. Studies show that especially men don't need it. And so you want to make sure that you do everything that can help you cope in a healthy way. Again, healthy sleeping habits, wellness, exercise, stress management, little breaks. This is how you overcome mental fatigue. Here's my resources that I used. Black Fatigue is the book that I used. How Racism Erodes the Mind, Body, and Spirit. My name is Kendall Brown, and thank you for attending my presentation.
Welcome back. Welcome back. Let's start our Q&A session. We'll do our best to answer as many questions as possible. If you'd like to speak, you can raise your virtual hand. You'll be unmuted so you can share. Remember to put any questions for our presenters in the Q&A. Now, help me welcome Kendall Brown for that amazing, amazing, amazing presentation.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline. Hey, everybody. Happy New Year. As you see, that was a recorded presentation. And so I'm here to answer any questions. I have my presentation here that I can share at any time. And also I have the book. If you have any questions, please feel free to answer them.
I want to again thank you, Kendall, for that amazing presentation. I'm really excited about that book, and I think I want to grab that myself. So thank you for bringing that to light and to the forefront. So that's awesome.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me. Central Texas.
Yes, that was just, again, so like right now, in terms of what we are dealing with, as you so eloquently covered, that we're dealing with as families, communities, individuals. And so, it's really been a lot, and I appreciate your time. I appreciate, just even as a trainer myself, even preparing such presentations, a lot of times it takes so much out of us because we want to, we put so much into it. So I'm going to just continue to say thank you, thank you, thank you for all that you poured into it. It's very apparent, that you're very passionate about this topic. So we want to thank you for all of that. And I just like to say one of the, our chat box is lit up. I love when the chat box lights up and there's so much saying you were awesome and thank you. Thank you very much for such an awesome presentation is what I see that's being said in the chat box. So I do have a question. There's a question out there for you is how do you establish a self-care routine and stick to it?
Excellent question. Okay, thank you, Jacqueline, for all those lovely things you said. And thanks everybody who has said awesome. While I was definitely, I did put a lot of thought into it. I'm very passionate about the topic. Being an African-American woman in the United States, So how do you put a routine in place? Well, the first thing you have to do is you're going to have to, I think, having a journal, having a planner, and identifying what do you want it to look like. So you're going to start from the top, what time you want to wake up? What do you want to do after you wake up? Is it eat? Is it, journal? Is it, come up with a goal list, a to-do list. A to-do list is really good to have because it keeps you on target. It also makes you feel accomplished when you are able to scratch off and check off things on there. So that's very beneficial. The stick-to-itness is a difficult part, right? So you will create the list for your day-to-day, and then you want to wean yourself off. So you don't want to have every day. Maybe you'll start to you don't have to put breakfast on there every day because by after a week or two, you should know you're going to have breakfast, right? You keep it consistent. Not so much ritualistic, but enough to maintain it. And so the stick to itness is every day you got to look at it to tell yourself, I got to do this, because otherwise you'll say, nah, I'll do it tomorrow. But tomorrow it won't be the same. It's easy to quit after you start one day and you take a day off. So the best thing is to maintain anything is to always stick to it and not take a break. If you take a break, that break will be 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, and it's always hard to jump back into it. So that's why a lot of people say, oh yeah, I did it for 3 weeks. And then then it ended. Oh yeah, I did it for another 3 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever. And it'll stop because you have to not take a break, and you have to be in your mind. So the mind is always the start of everything. So it has to start in your mind, the decision, I'm going to stick to this. I want this. And you have to want it, and you have to, just be ready for that change. And it's hard. I won't say that it won't be. I hope that answered your question.
Thank you for that, Kendall. So another question is how to get the references from the book. How does one get the references?
The references that I put in my PowerPoint, or so the book is just Mary Frances Winter. So you can actually, because her book is so new, she wrote it during 2020. She had probably like the first 3 chapters. If you Google this book, Black Fatigue, you may be able to have access to like the first 3 chapters of her book was free, I believe. I'm not sure if it's still free. And the references that were in my PowerPoint, I can just pull them up, and I guess I can show them the resources that I had. Here we go. It went to the beginning, just great. Okay, so what I'm gonna have to do is exit. Okay, just share it this way. So here are the resources. I hope I'll leave it up momentarily so that maybe you're able to write them down.
Cool. Another question is, can you talk about relationships between parents and child?
Parent and child, relationships between parent and child. It's a very broad question because one thing for sure, there's no handbook to parenting. And so parenting will always be unique to personalities, your personality, your child's personality. And it's going to be important to really learn who your kid is and, work with them based on who they are. A big thing that I work with kids in specialty. And so I like for parents to learn their kids' love language. How does your kid like to receive love? And even identify the way you like to receive love. And so that you guys can be on the same page when we're talking about, supporting them, loving them for far as that goes. Now, when we're talking about how, if you want to make it more connected to the pandemic and how parenting looks, one would have to, these are deep conversations, and based on the child's age and appropriateness and what you share with them, they're heavy. And I think that it's always best for your kid to be the first primary source, then a secondary source. So to talk to your kids about things that could arise, definitely, when it comes to being fatigued, because if we're struggling with things, definitely the kids can be, if they are aware of what's going on and have been exposed to, and of course they're aware of the topic of racism and of COVID-19, because your life has changed and so has theirs. With school, a lot of kids are struggling with trying to find socialization if they're having to stay at home and do school, and even the book part of it, how do I stay on the grade level, and the state of Texas, I heard that they're going to have this test, the STAR test, going to be, which is interesting, but they're going to have the kids take the STAR test in the midst of this pandemic. And so that's another conversation. So it's a lot when you say that you ask about parenting, and that's a really broad question. So you could write something else and I'll be happy to answer.
We have another question, is that when you have a friend showing signs of fatigue, how do we support them in restoring health?
So when you have a friend that is experiencing fatigue, the first thing you want to do is always just be supportive, right? Create a safe zone so your friend feels like they can talk to you and not be judged by you. That's going to be the first thing, and getting them in a space where they feel that it's safe and that they can talk to you, and tell them that, give them resources, and maybe just talk to a professional, because you won't always be the all in all. You can send them references about something that you could look up about how to deal with it. We have counseling at the Potter's House, and so you can send them there. You could share with them what you've learned today. And not everybody's going to be ready to, move past it, because it's a difficult thing when you're not emotionally intelligent, or just so that's the same thing as self-aware. You may not even recognize you can be fatigued. And so maybe the awareness of having a conversation of some of the things you've observed with them and asking them how they need your support, and just try to provide it the best way you can.
Okay, another question is, what is the ideal candidate for EMDR therapy? And are there certain experiences or diagnoses that this therapy works best to address?
Okay, great question. As noted, I am trained in EMDR therapy, which is eye movement desensitization, right? So what's happening in EMDR is for trauma. And so it was created for trauma, but other people can deal with it. It could be minimum trauma. It could be, so it doesn't have to be something as major as a murder or an assault. It could just be something that could be traumatic to you. And so trauma is based on how you experience it, how it has affected you. So there is not a criteria. It could just be one experience of trauma and one could qualify for EMDR. Or it could be compounded or repetitive traumas, you know. What was the end of that question, Jacqueline?
The end of it is, are there certain experiences or diagnoses that this therapy works best to address?
No. So PTSD, that's what EMDR is known to help, which is post-traumatic stress syndrome. So it helps with that. It can help with depression. It can help with, suicidal ideations. It just depends on what the trauma is, and because EMDR can help you process any trauma. And that's basically what it is. You don't have to have a special diagnosis or a situation or been exposed to anything. It can be for any individual who wants to work through something that they feel like they can't get over. They can't get over that hump. Mm-hmm.
How does EMDR help with Black fatigue?
So how the way EMDR works is you usually focus on a specific incident. And so how EMDR could help with Black fatigue, it would be to address a specific situation that you may be. So when I read this book, I mean, she went detail to detail with the George Floyd incident. That's how recent it was. I'm like, oh, wow, and so I started to feel that same experience when I read this in September that I had felt in May. And so it was like triggering and awakening, so it was a traumatic thing to see George for me. So I'm like, oh, and so time and time again, those type of things, seeing people murdered on TV live, this was very traumatic. So what I'm saying is how that could work is doing EMDR, and what you do is reprocess. I can reprocess that event so that I could not feel it the same way. Absolutely.
So you talked about and answered a question as it relates to the relationship between child and parent. Can you now talk a little bit about like stress on relationships between child and parents?
Mm-hmm. The stress on the relationship with child and parent. Okay. Well, as I said, there's no handbook for parenting. So in both roles, it can be stressful for the parent, trying to figure out the answers and how to parent, discipline, lead and guide. Can be very stressful because you won't always know exactly which way to go and what's the best. But you have to use what you know from your own experience, and maybe do some research. But again, that research does not mean it's going to fit for your kid. So you have to make sure that it is effective and it will be something that can be beneficial for your kid. Now, it could also be stressful because a kid is in the role of figuring things out. And as a parent, kids look up to you. You're the person that they look up to. And so they're looking for your guidance. And so if you are indecisive and uncertain, that can make them feel insecure, or also they struggle with things, but that can be just part of the stress of being a kid, and trying to figure those things out, so that's a little bit about it. Those topics definitely can go more in depth because it's a huge thing, right? Children tend to experience stress a little different than adults. And so you definitely should check in with your kid anytime, always. So, and to identify, and be able to kind of sense if your kid's having some stress, if they're acting a little different, and stress can look different, or, especially during the pandemic, because like I said, they're at school. Even at school, it can be stressful if they're back in the environment, like wearing a mask all day. That can grow old, but it's also a reminder, I got a mask on because I can get sick or I can bring sickness home. So there's a lot of things that can cause stress for a kid.
What things do you say can be done to not seem paranoid in front of children as it relates to all that's going on right now?
Say that again. Sorry, I was turning my share off.
Oh, that's okay. So how can we not seem paranoid in front of children as it relates to all that's going on right now?
Okay, good question. How can we not seem paranoid? Well, you can pretend, but that won't always be beneficial, right? And sometimes, as a parent, we have to save face. We have to pretend a little bit to kind of shield our kids. But at the same time, it's realistic to let them know, like, I'm concerned too. I mean, we don't want to be fake. And so they have to know that, because you're teaching them a whole lot in the moment. So a kid grows up to be an adult, they have to know that it's okay that sometimes I will panic, sometimes I will be stressed, sometimes I will feel those things. And in that moment, you teach them how to deal with it. And so sometimes you talk it out, hey, I have this is a lot, and you can be transparent as much as possible based on the kid's age, right? What's appropriate for that kid. And so, a little bit of honesty goes a long way with the kid. And if they're too young to understand that, then, you don't disclose as much, and you kind of shield them a little bit, again, but for the most part, you want to just be transparent and sharing, but again, not oversharing, depending on the kid's age.
Any specific mental health resources or supports for Black men?
I do. So there's this mental health for Black men. You can email me and I can come up with something. So there's the book called the Black Male Handbook. I think there's a book that Hill Harper wrote for Black males as well. There's a book called Dear Martin for Black young males. Off the top of my head, I can't think of specific resources. That's as far as I can think of as of now.
You want to give your website, your email address out?
Yes, it is kbrown@tdjakes.org. I just had it up there, sorry. It is kbrown@tdjakes.org. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So what would you say in terms of, and I know you've talked a lot about the importance of self-care, self-awareness. What would you say, you covered in your presentation, a lot that the news is talking about, like every day, all day, the various things related to the pandemic in terms of not having enough room for bodies and things like that. What would you say, or do you have any suggestions for how much news someone should take in on a daily basis? And then with that being said, how to identify and know when it's time to just cut it off, and that it's okay to cut it off?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that's balance right there. That is like social media life balance, right? You have to, at any point, you shouldn't be on there too much. There's a lot of apps people do to say to monitor how much time they're on there. Just because you can spend your life like, oh my gosh, I've been on here for 2 hours. Whoa, just because of what's happening is refreshing constantly. It's constantly refreshing more, which is not always good for our brains anyways, taking in so much information. But when we were talking about the negative stuff that's draining on your mental health, that can be, again, that can cause fatigue. So I'm really big on posting and ghosting. So if I have to post something, I'm not going to be on there. I just post and I'll leave. And I may like a few things, but I don't stay on social media a whole lot, because it's not always just, I mean, it's a whole lot of fictitious things on there. It's a lot of drama. It's some positivity too. But it's more so what news and what sells is drama, you know, and stressful stuff sells, and so that's what's posted, you know. So I would definitely recommend that, you know, you don't spend a whole lot of time every day, you know, and even if you're spending time on Facebook every day, or should it be, you know, like every other day, or just find some balance and not being overloaded with the information that you can get from Facebook, any social media, Instagram, any of those things. And even like you said with the news, so I find myself, not watching the news, and so I just get the news from my mom, what's happening. I had no idea, but what happens is that you don't be aware of things, so you have to kind of find balance, because I didn't know what happened at the Capitol, because I don't watch the news. So I was like, I got on in social media, I'm like, oh my gosh, what's happening, you know. So you want to stay abreast of what's going on in the world, but at the same time you want to find balance. And so how you know it's affecting you is if you start to think about how you see yourself, right? It could be self-esteem, you know, like people see things on social media. It's like, oh my gosh, she just got that new house. Oh my gosh, she just got a new car. Oh my gosh, he balling out of control. You know, all of the different things that people may see, and you think, oh my gosh, you know, I'm trying to keep up with the Joneses. Or it could be just, oh my gosh, you know, another brutality. Oh my gosh, you know, and so that can be overwhelming. So then you say, okay, well, I'm kind of sad. You feeling yourself feeling blue. Okay, that's too much social media. You feeling yourself feeling self-conscious. You need to fall back, and that's why sometimes people take those breaks, a sabbatical from social media.
Awesome. So a lot of times children are around when we're watching the news and things are happening, even in terms of like social media, things that we might have conversations about what we hear and see on social media. So what would you say in terms of how to counter what children are exposed to, what they're hearing and seeing, even in terms of specifically social media?
Well, one of the things you can't completely shelter a kid and guard them from everything. That's just life. And some exposure is good. You know, I was reading that because I was doing some research. Sometimes I tell my parents to create like maybe an agenda about how much time that their child is on, you know, have screen time and things like that. And I read that, you know, it's not healthy to have no screen time, because it kids need to know how to use technology. They need to know how to you know, adapt and be technological savvy. But at the same time, they don't need to spend all day, and every time you do something, hey, here's a tablet, hey, here's a tablet, you know. It should be some balance. A lot of times too, kids, they just spend so much time on screens. But okay, so back to your question. You want to flood your kid with always positive things, you know. So if they are into the hip hop culture, or they're into fashion or whatever it is, you want to be able to be the loudest voice. Again, you want to be that primary source. And so you want to feed them positive things. You want them to know truth and allow it to come from you, and not be what they see on social media. So you create a foundation. So whenever they go into any room or anywhere, that they know what truth is. Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. Very, very valuable information, Kendall. Wow. I think
Thank you.
I'm so glad that I'm here with you, because I'm learning so much as well. And putting some things in my toolbox. So speaking
Great.
of toolbox, what would you say, and I know you've talked about a lot, what would you say would be like the top three things that someone can do right now where they are?
Top three is so many things we could do. Okay, so when you say the top three things like that they can do from where they are, addressing just mental health in general.
Just like this fatigue, the topic of fatigue.
Okay, the top three things you can do. The first thing you can do is become self-aware. That's the biggest thing that you can do. If you are aware of how you feel, that's half the battle, is being aware. Because sometimes you can be upset or angry, sad, and not even aware of it immediately or initially. And so it could take time to be like, oh my gosh, I've been sad all week. Or, you could feel some type of way and not know what that feeling is. So self-awareness is the first thing you can do. The second thing you can do is share. If you're going to allow whatever it is that you're going through, you're feeling, you're going to release it, and it's going to be from your fingertips or your lips. Let it go. And what I mean, you write it, journal from your fingertips or from your lips, and you can speak it. One thing that I have my clients do, if they don't like to journal, like, I don't like to write, I don't want to do that. Okay, so then do a video journal. Pull out your phone, turn the camera on, and press record. If you don't feel like you have a safe person to process with, but find somebody to talk to. It could be a mental health professional, or it could be a friend, but it's good to talk about it. So share is number 2. And number 3 would be to protect your space, right? You protect your space by what you bring in, and so like that's one of the things, like social media, TV, news, friends, like, hey, like right now, I'm not here. I don't want to hear that right now. Those kind of things. And so you protect your space, you protect yourself, you guard your heart. Okay, so the first one was self-awareness. Second is share. And the third one would be to protect your space. Yes. Thank you so much. You've been so great. I am happy. I'm thankful for all the people that have asked questions. It's been such a privilege and a great opportunity today. And yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you. And I would like to thank you, Kendall, for all of your wealth and knowledge of information that you've poured into us today here at the conference. Thank you for sharing and the insight that you have. Thank you for sharing that with us. So all of your hours of study and research and practice and experience that you've so eloquently and graciously shared that with us through and during this time. And many thanks to all of you. Many thanks to all of you for joining us today. I am sending positive joy, and I'm sending just heartfelt love and hugs. We're here for the first time virtually, but we're sending all of that good positive stuff we have in person. We've proven it can be done virtually. So thank you again, Kendall. You are amazing.
Yes,
and
indeed.
So wonderful. So everyone, please take a few minutes to complete the workshop survey. It helps us to know how we're doing. And if you're seeking CEUs, remember that your forms will be in the survey. The links are in the chat. So once again, go through the link and go through the chat and find those links. And so, y'all, this has been absolutely amazing. And just listening to you, Kendall, and getting all of that information, I'm not feeling as fatigued as I had been, earlier this week. So you are, once again, you're so amazing, and it's so awesome. And again, we thank you all on behalf of our team, our planning committee, Integral Care. We are so fortunate to have you with us. And we hope and trust that you will enjoy the rest of the conference. Have a wonderful day and see you next time.
Thank you.